Here we are again with some more sociology. Last week we went over how sociology is done and what we actually look at. And this week I'll be putting down some more bedrock with socialization. So we'll be looking at what it is and how it happens, specifically at a couple theories about how it happens. And spoiler alert, I'm very big on gender theory, so I'll definitely be using examples from that to illustrate this. But anyway, without further ado, let's dive into socialization. What is socialization? Well, you can probably guess it's something social since it's both got social in the name and is part of sociology. Specifically, though, socialization refers to the process of society shaping our conception of self and the learning process we all go through for the norms and conventions of social interaction within our society. There are various agents that kind of take us through socialization, falling into three main categories, divided broadly by stage in life. First off, primary agents. These would be family, the closest people around us when we're still babies, followed by secondary agents, such as peers or societal institutions like schools, churches, etc., the kind of stuff we encounter throughout childhood. And finally, we have adult agents that will socialize us during adulthood, since we aren't set in stone. Basically, socialization is a lifelong process of learning the rules of existing within society and learning to be them. But then, how will does this occur? Well, as you've hopefully come to expect, there are a few theories, and we'll be going through them shortly. So when I said shortly, I meant right now. And the first and core theory that we're going to start off with is symbolic interactionism. Essentially, it's a great lens through which to analyze interactions within society and socialization, since socialization involves interactions. So, some dude, whose name isn't super important because I totally didn't forget it, from Chicago, was like, yo, dude, society's like a bunch of symbols, yeah, and how they all interact. So, like, what if we conceptualize of stuff as like symbolic interactions? And another Chicagoan was like, bro, that's so like amazing and a great idea. And yeah, that's symbolic interactionism. Okay, a more helpful description would be that it's a theory grounded in the idea that society is structured around social actors, so people, interpreting meaning within interpersonal communication of various kinds. So you could take it as interpreting symbols. An example would be if we take a look at Butler's performativity, where gender is not what we are, but rather a symbol that gains meaning through interactions with the people. So where this all ties back into socialization is that we can conceive of socialization as a sort of repetition of symbols that others produce, and we internalize their interpretations and we change them based on interactions we have. So now that the most philosophical part of the episode's over, let's look at a couple more straightforward theories that kind of build on this one. So the first straightforward theory is looking glass self. If I were to summarize it in a word, it'd be self-reflection. Just ignore that self-reflection is a hyphenated two-word thing, but anyway, this theory looks at the self being created through a process of interacting with others and taking feedback on how you present yourself. The idea is that you have stages of imagination. First, you imagine how you appear to others, then you imagine their judgments of you, and then you imagine how they feel about you based on those imagined judgments. Through this process, then, Looking Glass self posits that yourself is created, maintained, and tweaked within a context of society. The original conception suggested that there is an autonomy within this in picking sources you take as inputs, but realistically it would scale with social power, and we can debate all day whether that's truly autonomy, free choice, whatever, so we won't because there's one more theory left for today. And that last theory has two different names. Sometimes it's called presentation of self, and sometimes it's called Goffman's dramaturgical sociology. The latter is way cooler and also kind of illustrates what it's all about, so it's definitely the better name. Before we describe it in detail, though, we will have to make a note that Goffman takes the self to be situated in a context and not a static, essential object, which differs from what we would normally interpret self to mean. Now, the theory. Dramaturgical sociology is this idea of society and socialization as a kind of play on a stage, creating, maintaining, and destroying the common understanding of reality by a person or a group of people. In the same way that a play has scripted dialogue, gestures, props, and all, social interaction and socialization can also be seen through that same lens. If we go back to Butler again, this would be reflected in something like the heterosexual matrix, in the sense that the matrix is a sort of script for gender and sexuality for people within our society that we all play. Also relevant to this from gender theory is Gagnon and Simon's sexual script that are pretty directly drawing on this idea because they talk about scripted interaction for sexuality and how it's reproduced and socialized. Of course, the scripts aren't a literal script to read from, rather an abstraction, but this is sociology, so of course we love abstractions and theories. And so that's socialization, and its key theoretical frameworks that we can use to understand social interaction. A lifelong process, we can interpret socialization through symbolic interactionism with its symbol interpretations, through the looking glass self-reflective theory, and finally we can look at the performative aspects with Goffman's dramaturgical sociology. Next week, we'll be stepping up a level and looking at the construction of society more overall, and describing broadly the groupings in society. As always, link to the next episode is to my right, or if you're an early viewer, thank you by the way, that'll just be a link to the playlist of all of these videos so you can get your fill of sociological knowledge. But that is all for today, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.